This is Marco Reus.
This is Shinji Kagawa.
This is Nuri Sahin.
Hello, this is Jadon Sancho.
And you're listening to the Yellowwallpod podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 379 of the Yellowwallpod. I'm your host Stefan Butzko, and today we will celebrate Borussia Dortmund winning the DFB-Pokal and qualifying for the Champions League. And for all of that joins me Matthias Zug.
Look at us. Hey, look at us.
Look at us. Huh? Who would have thought?
Not me.
Hello Matthias, how are you doing?
I never had any doubt, Stefan. If you would have asked me back in early April, said, of course Dortmund are going to win the Cup and qualify for the Champions League. I mean, how could you possibly doubt it? Now, I am doing very well. How are you?
Yeah, Matthias, I'm actually doing really great now. Sadly, there wasn't a podcast the last week because I was in Germany, and sadly, I attended my father's funeral on Wednesday, so it was a very, very stressful week because I had all kinds of paperwork to do, but I was lucky to catch the cup final when I was /packing in the first half / driving to the airport in the second half and watch it on my phone, and then I could download the game and watch it again on my phone while I was flying. So yeah, I enjoyed it as much as I could, considering I was on the road. But yeah, obviously it is just amazing that Dortmund won this game, and in the fashion they did win it. Matthias, sadly, we are not as up to date as we should be usually, but nevertheless, we have some episode sponsors, and before I forget that, let's announce them.
Wir sind komplett schuldenfrei, wir zahlen keinen einzigen Euro an Zinsen.
So this episode is sponsored by Shreshta Balachandar, by Daniel Winterton and Jordan Hunt. I hope I got all these names correctly, and a massive thank you to you all. Obviously a real help for us, and if you people out there want to sponsor an episode as well, go to patreon.com/theyellowwall for more information. Matthias, this obviously has been an amazing game, and since it's been a while, I thought I'll cut together the little highlight reel, and I think we can dive in that before we actually discuss the game, so we have our memories refreshed.
Left-hand side of that back three. Now nipping in Marco Reus, and here's Erling Haaland. He's holding it up for Dahoud. Sancho, and he takes on the shot. It's brilliant. Jadon Sancho. What a start for Borussia Dortmund. Now Haaland, he can do damage from here. Erling Haaland, and places it for the second Dortmund goal. Erling Haaland. And there's Upamecano to meet him. The play's going to continue. Advantage with Borussia Dortmund, and it's Jadon Sancho who's simply got to score. Dortmund continue to play on the break, and that means Jadon Sancho, and they might really be onto something here with Hazard and Haaland in support. Erling Haaland, and there's the shot from Haaland, and that will do it for Borussia Dortmund. That is going to make certain that the Schwarz-Gelben will be lifting the pot in 2021, and Haaland with a double to match the earlier brace from Jadon Sancho.
So Matthias, how great was it for you to see Dortmund hoist this trophy, to hoist Lukas Piszczek, and all the other emotions that went on during and after the final? Wasn't it fantastic?
I mean, it was amazing. I mean, hearing the great Derek Ray again there, I was sitting here with goosebumps listening to that. And then, of course, the fourth goal, hearing Casey Keller, who really needs to work on his pronunciations, by the way. laughing because of the way that goal happened. It's just, I mean, it was perfect, especially against obviously RB Leipzig, but ignoring, you know, the Dosen franchise. It was an amazing moment for Borussia Dortmund, who have had obviously a very difficult season, a very topsy-turvy season. Seeing the way Lukas Piszczek was treated and the emotions pouring from him, I was very emotional. I was actually in Florida at the time for work, and my son was watching it back at home, and he got really emotional because, you know, like I wrote on Twitter, he has to have another surgery. And so, you know, it was one of those emotional days, and Dortmund just made it so much better. And I did have mojitos at the beach afterwards. Victory mojitos. So it was great. You know, I mean, my first great footballing memory, truly great one, was when Borussia Dortmund won the cup in 1989. That was, you know, after I wasn't
even born then.
Yeah, shut up, Stefan. Who cares? No, but you know, after decades of really bleh with Dortmund, you know, including a relegation to the Zweite Bundesliga, including the highest ever loss in Bundesliga history, including just 3 years prior to that, barely scraping through the relegation playoff against Fortuna Köln to not get relegated out of the Bundesliga, to then have them with Nobby Dickel and Michael Zorc win that cup. That was huge for me as a kid at that time, because I'd only known Dortmund mediocrity and failure up to that point, kind of like, you know, Schalke fans. But at this point, granted, Schalke at the time were actually in the Zweite Bundesliga, but it was so awesome to see not just the performance, but just how much everybody cared. I mean, really cared. And then to see it in Terzic's face when the final whistle blew, it was like, it meant more to him than to any coach, except maybe Jürgen Klopp. But probably it meant more to Terzic than Jürgen Klopp, because Edin Terzic is from the region. He is a Dortmund fan. He was born and raised that way. Not a cliche Twitter, you know, I grew up in Dortmund bedsheets kind of way, but an actual grew up in Dortmund bedsheets kind of way. And so it was all around. It was perfect. It was a perfect evening.
You know, I don't even know what would happen to me if I was a diehard Dortmund fan and then would, as a coach, win the cup trophy. I mean, the pictures were shared by Dortmund's Twitter, where he, first of all, I think a picture of him as a rather young kid in a Dortmund shirt, and then, of course, him standing among the fans in the, I think that was from 2012, right? I'm not entirely sure, but I think so. That he was just there as a fan. I'm pretty sure I would have just fallen unconscious. You know, I was very scared for Terzic to basically do the same, because you could see it in his face. You know, he was very, very close to losing it. But yeah, what an amazing story, Matthias. You know, there's this phrase in Germany that people always say, and just, you know, only soccer writes those stories, basically. But yeah, what a what a great story that is. And I'm so happy for him that he outcoached Bayern Munich's Wonder Boy 30 million or whatever
for a third time.
Yeah,
for a third time, not the first time, 3 times.
I mean, I think Dortmund really needed that early goal again, and just kudos to Jadon Sancho for this really cool finish, because, you know, one of his superpowers, I think, is to really have this quick release shot, you know, where I think in Germany we call it ansatzlos, where you as a defender can hardly read the shot because he doesn't really swing his foot by much, but you know, it's still a very powerful curler that he shot there past Gulashi and the 2 defenders, basically. Also, another nice assist by Dahoud, who could have also, I think, slotted through to Haaland, but he did find Sancho. And yeah, I think that's just absolutely clutch, this goal. And, you know, I think you could really see Leipzig's nerves prior to that. I mean, we obviously have to talk about the way this goal started, because it did start with Marco Reus taking the ball with former Dortmund legend Kevin Campbell. That was obviously a quick move, and I don't know how the game otherwise would have gone, but I think this was psychologically such a big blow for Leipzig that they didn't quite know how to recover from that. And I also do not remember that many big chances by Leipzig in the entire first half, if I'm completely honest. I think the one by Nkunku straight after halftime was probably the best chance by then. Matthias, how did you see the game? Because you just said everyone showed up like they cared, and I think that's absolutely true. And I think if you will, the player who cared the most was obviously Marco Reus, because to me he is easily the man of the match, even though he did not score a goal himself, but he was involved in, I think, 3 out of 4.
You know, I'm so happy for Marco Reus because, you know, a lot of people thought at the onset of the season he's done. You know, he's over 30 now. He's had obviously his injury history, and he had a very, I'd say, below average start to the season for the first half of the season. But he wasn't alone in that. I think we can pretty much say all Dortmund players were in that boat. And the way he's turned it on in the last few weeks has been, I mean, that's the best Marco Reus you can see, is what we've seen in the last few weeks. That is 25-year-old Marco Reus. That's 29-year-old Marco Reus at his peak, now in his 30s again. And that's great to see. And that's why, on a side note, it's a shame that he's not going to the Euros with Germany, but I totally understand why, because he's like, well, you know, I don't have a lot of injury luck when it comes to these Germany call-ups, and odds are it's going to be debacle for Germany anyway, so let me just stay home and have another great season next year for Dortmund. But, you know, he played fantastic. Jadon Sancho is unplayable right now. He is absolutely unplayable. And when you look at the way the game played out, it was done at halftime. And you're right, Leipzig really didn't do much in the first half. They had possession, no doubt. We knew that was going to happen. They've dominated possession in the last 3 meetings. But Nkunku had a chance. They had a few chances, and there was kind of that 15-20 minutes at the start of the second half where you could say Leipzig were the better side. But 15-20 minutes don't an entire Pokal final make. And if we look at key stats from this game, Leipzig had 22 shots, Dortmund had 10. Dortmund had 5 on target, and Leipzig only had 4. And that's it. They are not clutch. I mean, they choked badly in quite a few situations where they should have scored. Dortmund also 7 to 4 corners. And I always like my loser stat is crosses. He who crosses the most loses. If you are the team with possession. If you're the team without possession, you cross a lot. It actually can work out. But a team with 60% possession with 22 shots with 20 crosses versus Dortmund's 10, this is a trend in these 3 Terzic versus Nagelsmann matches where Dortmund won 3 times and scored 10 goals, conceding 4 against the best defense in the Bundesliga. Every time Leipzig has crossed the ball more than 20 times. And the question is, who are they crossing it to? Because Sørloth was non-existent. Paulsen actually wasn't that bad, but the strikers didn't exist for Leipzig in this match. Dani Olmo was by far the most, him and Nkunku were the most dangerous players. But if Dani Olmo and Nkunku are the guys you're relying on to try to score your goals, at Dortmund we know that that's dangerous if you're relying on players that are not your true attackers, your strikers, to score the goals for you. And that was one of the key aspects of Leipzig that once again, for a 3rd time against Dortmund, didn't do anything for an entire first half, which Dortmund then controlled and essentially won in that time frame. And B, when they did come out in the second half, they were still wasteful. And they were wasteful in this situation as well. And the big difference is, unlike the last Bundesliga match against Leipzig, where Dortmund let Leipzig really back in and then had to dig it out at the end and win 3-2. Dortmund really, aside from a short period, about 10, 15 minutes, they regained their composure and then just kind of cruised it out. And it was great that final goal was kind of a slapstick goal, because it rubs a lot of salt into a hopefully very exposed Leipzig wound.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny how Leipzig crumbled as a whole franchise, if you will, just because, I think they're not too keen on Nagelsmann now that he's leaving. There are a lot of hurt feelings over there. So, basically having their franchise wonder boy Erling Haaland, who came from Salzburg, break all their hearts. It's just like the sweet, sweet cherry on top, Matthias. So I enjoyed even more. And, it was also just hilarious how Haaland just bumped off Upamecano when he scored the second goal. I mean, I don't know how many strikers in the world can even do that. It was another great pass by Marco Reus, but then this switch of speed, basically, that Haaland just sort of stopped on an instant, and then Upamecano just tried to recover and just crashed into him and fell back. That was just amazing to see. You see things like that maybe in the NBA sometimes, or in the NFL here, that then became like famous iconic moments in the highlight reel. So yeah, that to me was just epitomizing how good Dortmund were and how poor Leipzig were. I mean, Upamecano didn't have the best game yet again, I must say. I'm sure he will improve down the road, and I'm sure it's easier to go up against other players than Upamecano. But then also fantastic finish of Haaland, and I think for the third goal it was Upamecano again who just got Haaland and I think crashed into him, and that was pretty painful. But the counterattack was on, and absolutely amazing composure by Marco Reus to find Jadon Sancho, and then Sancho to take advantage of the slippery field and wait until the defender had sat on his butt before slotting it home. I mean, that's the thing about this game. The goals were all super great. The only bummer, if you will, is that Torgan Hazard couldn't connect with that Reus pass later, and that Jadon Sancho, after rounding Gulaschi, tried a little bit too much there and not slowed home. Because let's be real, I think if every team had been clinical with their chances, Dortmund arguably would have won maybe 6-3 or something like that, if you will, or 7-3. I don't know about you, Matthias, but I thought that Dortmund were still a little bit wasteful on the counterattack, especially in the second half. Not as composed, but when the 4-1 came, I think that really did seal the deal.
Yeah, I mean, Jadon Sancho had an opportunity, a glorious opportunity, and when you look at the high quality chances, Nagelsmann after the match being the typical prick he is, I really don't like the guy. I mean, the unsympathisch doesn't even begin to describe him. He makes Thomas Tuchel look like a warm and fuzzy teddy bear. But, he said we by far were not the worst team. If you look at high quality chances that should be goals, Dortmund still wins the game 6-3. So, Dortmund, yes, they were a little bit wasteful, but I guess when you score 4, you can afford to waste 2. Whereas with Leipzig, that's not the case. I mean, it was just, taking all the tactics and strategy out of it. Terzic, this is the funny thing for me. And you mentioned it, the Bayern Wonder Boy, 30 million, 25 million euro transfer fee they paid for Nagelsmann, who got outcoached 3 times by a 38-year-old assistant coach who had never been a head coach outside of kid teams, who was only an interim solution, and not only got mildly outcoached, he got completely outcoached, and his team got completely outplayed 3 times. And to do it in that manner, it's kind of like when Dortmund won the double with Jürgen Klopp, and they did so by beating Bayern 5-2 in the cup final. It feels the same way. The only difference is obviously then we had fans in the stadium, but it was kind of such a demoralizing victory over the opponent that just makes it even better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's especially for Dortmund fans, but not only Dortmund fans, also I would say a lot of Bundesliga fans, denying Leipzig a trophy for as long as possible so they can put it on their stupid CV. And, I think for the entire self-understanding of Leipzig, this has been really amazing. So, yeah, I don't know what else to say, really, but I think we saw a lot of regular Bundesliga fans root for Dortmund, and we're really happy that Dortmund did win the cup. And, it's one of those games that I think I will never really forget and will do remember in detail. Also just because of how Marco Reus played. And I think we need to talk about this a little bit more in detail, because it's not only that he was so meaningful for the way Dortmund scored the goals. I mean, just think about the 4-1? The counterattack where Haaland, I think, headed in the ball, and he just, with one really slick move, just sort of punted the ball forward. But, that's already a bit, that's not describing nice enough, because it was a really smart and clever pass.
I mean, the other aspect of Marco Reus's game that I think people tend to forget because you focus on passing and movement and goals is he's one of the best pressing attacking players in the Bundesliga. I mean, even under Lucien Favre in matches where it wasn't really happening, sometimes Marco Reus just basically said, fuck it, pressed individually, took the ball off the opponent, and created opportunities and goals. When it comes to pressing resistance, but also pressing and taking tenacity and taking a ball off an opponent without fouling, he's exceptional. He is absolutely exceptional, and I struggle to think of many attacking players that are better at that aspect than Marco Reus.
Yeah, the thing with Marco Reus is I actually did not expect him to find this peak again, especially because, his speed isn't entirely there. Matthias, you just said that he was about what? You said that he was in his peak in about when he was 25 or 26 or so, and you can definitely see
roughly
that he's not as quick anymore. But nevertheless, I think in this form, it's quite amazing, and I would say he is playing even a bit more intelligently than he did before, because the experience does show a little. So in that regard, I'm just really happy to have Marco Reus in this form, and I really hope he can conserve it throughout the cup final, because that's maybe the one thing that irked me a little bit, and I think he said that after the Mainz game, is that Dortmund sort of started to step up when everything was on the line, i.e. Champions League. But I think this sort of mentality, or whatever you want to call it, that Dortmund need to feel that everything is on the line, like there's a deadline coming to them that makes them step up. I feel like this is something that they need to feel from the outset of the season, because you don't have a potential, maybe even championship winning team in there if with players like Sancho and Haaland for a very long time. I don't know if the match against Leverkusen will be Sancho's final match for Dortmund or not. We will just have to wait for the summer there. But my point is, if Dortmund would play like this, like they did in the last 6-7 games or so, or maybe 8 or 10, if you want to include the quarterfinals against Manchester City, then definitely this team can go to much higher heights than we've seen throughout the season. But obviously, that's always easy to say. It is obviously a process. The team had to develop. A lot of players were out of form, and obviously they had to adjust a little bit to what Terzic wanted to do. So I can understand why the season was so up and down. But it does sometimes feel like a chance missed. But before we talk about all that, we do have a surprise guest who I invited like 45 minutes before we started recording, and he was napping, but now he's here. Archie Rintot. Hello, Archie. The ESPN correspondent who I hope conducted the interviews after the cup match. I think you were there. So Archie, you are basically the perfect guest to have now that we actually talk about the trophy ceremony and of course the post-match interview. So hey Archie, how are you doing?
Stefan, hello. Pleasure to chat to you again, let alone that it's on a podcast. That's lovely. And hello to you too, Matthias.
Hello, Archie. Always a pleasure to have a legend here.
What? I mean, Stefan's already here. What are you on about?
All right, let's move on here, and before you make me blush. But Archie, obviously, you were one of the few privileged people that were in the stadium. So, how did you observe the ceremonies and then the post match interviews? What is worthy of your reporting here now?
The thing I have to come to first is the sheer humanity of Edin Terzic. We've heard now in the last few days about this, any given Sunday speech that he gave before the game, according to Otto Addo, his assistant coach, and obviously former Dortmund player as well. And by that, I mean just he managed to capture the emotion of what the players had gone through, what they had overcome, the situations where Dortmund had not looked like the favourites in the past few weeks, and yet they'd still come out on top. And he managed to harness that and find a common goal for a set of players who, let's face it, a couple of months as a group were all over the place. And also, for me, I've not been in interviewing for too many years, but through the short time that I've been doing this job, this was one of the most emotional interviews that I had after the game with Edin Terzic. It's one of the only times that I've been close to tears. Just hearing the way that he talked and feeling his emotion when talking about the fact that he wasn't sure 6 months ago if he was going to be able to see his dad for much longer. And then he is now, and he gets to celebrate the cup win with him. That emotion really got through to me as well. And I have to say, Edin is... I can use unparliamentary language here, right?
Yeah, you can say whatever you want.
Oh, great. He's fucking great. Like, what a human being, man. Just, I've never seen someone who has united both, I would say, press corps, the press officers of whatever club he goes to, in terms of everyone is just left saying the same thing, which is, what a nice bloke. And I had the chance to interview him in January for ESPN. And back then, I didn't notice it at the time, maybe because German is my second language and we did it in English. But the people around me who I was filming it with said that, Edin looked a bit nervous before doing the interview. And to be fair, if we wind back that far, Dortmund had just lost to Borussia Mönchengladbach and Bayer Leverkusen in not too great fashion. Things looked very much on the ropes. There was even talk then about, oh God, is Terzic going to be the right guy to even finish the season with? And he put up a brave face that day. He has answered every question very diplomatically. I learned very quickly that it is wasting your own time if you're asking Edin Terzic about his future, because he's just not going to answer that. And I think he's proved to be the perfect guy to bring Borussia Dortmund forward to this point. And I think you can tell me this as well. I guess this is a question I have for you both, but he feels like the hole to the soul that Borussia Dortmund fans have needed from a coach since Jurgen Klopp left. I'm not saying he plugs it, but I'm saying that seeing him, even if you can't experience it in a stadium right now, and that is the number one thing I think that we're all looking forward to getting back to here, at least, it just does not compare. But just his authenticity and just seeing somebody who really is an actual fan of this club, I think that lends itself in a big way to Borussia Dortmund, because this is a club which, as you saw when the power is harnessed in the past, it has to be done properly.
Yeah, I mean, I can only agree and echo with everything that Archie just said. I think he fills the Jürgen Klopp hole in the soul, as you so wonderfully put it, but in a different way, because he's a Dortmunder Jung. You know, Jürgen Klopp was not that. Jürgen Klopp quickly associated with it, but, you know, he's a Schwab. And, you know, he's not from there, whereas Terzic is from there. So it's like, you know, this is something that you think you can only happen on the game Football Manager, where you take over your own team in a mid-season challenge and you win something with them. But this actually happened in real life. And I remember his first press conference post Lucien Favre. And the honesty I noticed right away. He answered questions, because we were used to the Favre non-committal answers, which, you know, other coaches do. Most of them do. And he answered it honestly and gave tactical insights. And that was great to see. And it wasn't to the detriment of the team, because I think some coaches, they don't talk tactics because they're worried they're going to be found out. Let's be honest. That was maybe thinking of the 1980s and 1990s. Now everybody sees what you're doing and you don't really have any surprises if you talk about tactics post-match. Maybe not pre-match, but post-match. And, you know, Stefan, you said something before Archie came on where he said, you know, Marco Reus mentioned, you know, now that Dortmund were back against the wall and they really tried and they really came together. And you said that's something that's been missing because, you know, Bayern always play that way, it seems, until they finally won and then they chill out. But the change in Dortmund's attitude came with Edin Terzic after a few weeks, because everyone kind of had to find each other. And the last time Dortmund played with urgency all the time was under Jürgen Klopp. So that is kind of the aspect of coaching that I think people tend to forget, is the motivation behind it, to get people to buy in and do it in hard times and in the good times and when things are cruising. And that's obviously the switch they have to make. It's a shame we're not going to see it with Edin Terzic, to see how it goes when you start with everybody starting with the same amount of points and see where it goes. But I think that is the key catalyst, the key difference in Dortmund in the last 3 to 4 months versus the year prior to that.
Yeah, I think there's one big factor, though, that Dortmund will have to compensate, but will be unable to compensate because it's just impossible to do that. And that is obviously Lukas Piszczek, because he was reintroduced as a right back very late in the season, and the way he did play was just outstanding. And obviously, he always said that when he extended his contract for another season, that he wanted to win something with Dortmund. Archie, you were there. How emotional was it to see Lukas Piszczek actually tear up? And we know he's Polish, and we know he's usually not the man for the big emotions. The only other time I think I saw him cry was actually after the defeat in the Champions League final in 2013. But he was just completely overwhelmed.
Yeah, he is the model professional, and the glimpses I had of him at the Olympiastadion were brief, but you could just see just these marks on his face from where he'd been crying. And I saw Erling Haaland jump in on his Sky interview and was just shouting "Legend." That was quite funny as well. But for me, actually, the real character of Lukasz Piszczek was seen a few days later when I was in Mainz for the game there. And Lukasz Piszczek is not in the squad, but he's still there in the stands, and he is still very much supporting his teammates from the side. At no point, even when he could not help on the pitch, he was helping and being himself off the pitch. And I think having somebody like that at your club, somebody who's not, dragging their feet behind them and is really just pushing for those standards, those are the kind of guys you need. And there's also that picture from when he went back to his hometown club, I think in Poland, where he just had an operation and he's on crutches and he's on the sideline. I think Lukasz Piszczek is one of those guys who just can't keep himself away from football in some way. So I'm looking forward to seeing where he pops up again now. But yeah, what a player. And I think that him leaving and Marcel Schmelzer now is just the final closing of the book, really, almost on the Klopp capital. I've gone German. On the Klopp chapter at Dortmund, really. There's few left on the playing staff who were still there and remember that. But yeah, in my learning of the Bundesliga, Lukasz Piszczek for me is, I have a little story, actually. I remember I was working for the Bundesliga YouTube channel a few years ago, and I spent half an hour finding a sound effect for Lukasz Piszczek sliding his balls into a post. And I will always be very appreciative of this because I got to classify this as work. No, in all seriousness, what a player and what a character, I think, as well.
Yeah, definitely. Matthias, I know your time on this podcast is running out a little for this episode because you have to leave soonish. So I don't know if you want to say anything else about the cup final or the very wet press conference or the celebrations, or if we should move on to the Mainz game. And I think we even have to briefly chat about the Leverkusen game, even though I'm not really prepared for that. And I also don't really care much about that result. Obviously, securing a third would be nice. But Matthias, if you have any final thoughts on that cup final, please be my guest.
Pokalsieger 2021. What else is left to say?
Right. So with that being said, I think it's perfectly fine now to move on to the game that clinched Dortmund the Champions League.
Meunier's cross. That was awkward for Da Costa. It reared up at him, that ball. Here is Sancho. And set up for the shot! And what a shot it is! A stunner from Rafael Guerreiro. So technically gifted, and he showed it there. Bellingham to Guerreiro, always looking to get involved. Now Jadon Sancho. Still going Sancho, the backing off, and there's the second. And what a week it's turning into for Borussia Dortmund. What a week it's turning into for Marco Reus. But Jadon Sancho was not locked down, and Mainz paid the penalty for that. Here is Haaland. Can he put the icing on the cake? Opportunity for Brandt to finish it. Surely now. And Borussia Dortmund are heading for the Champions League. It's been a rocky road, full of ups and downs. But finally they are on the way. Lead 3-0.
Yeah, there we go. I mean, it wasn't the most entertaining game. It wasn't edge of the seat stuff because Mainz had obviously clinched their staying in the Bundesliga on the previous night. And, I think the cup final sort of did help Dortmund in that regard because if you want to call making the competition a little bit unfair, I think that totally happened here because Mainz were not exactly in their tip-top shape. And I think Bo Svensson said as much before the game already. So that people maybe shouldn't hold their breath too much. And it wasn't also the most glamorous performance by Borussia Dortmund, but nevertheless, Matthias, they did what they had to do, especially, and I still don't know how it happened, but after Eintracht Frankfurt lost 4-3 against FC Schalke somehow, I mean, come on, Frankfurt, I mean, you already,
Stefan,
you already shed the bet against Mainz a little bit.
Pretending that you can stop pretending that you don't like Schalke. It's okay. It shines through.
Well,
I mean, wasn't it for a week, Stefan, here on the podcast where we always said, oh, they're playing Schalke. Well, that's the automatic win. I mean,
that's what you would expect. How do you lose 4-3 to Schalke in this season? Seriously.
But remember, Freddy Bobic said it's been a perfect A performance for a season for Frankfurt this season.
Right. Sure. Good luck with that, Frankfurt fans, with that quote. I'm sure if I were Frankfurt fan, I'd be super happy with that.
I'd hate that. I'd hate that. But the thing about this game, yeah, it was, I think the soundbite you had there with Sancho's goal pretty much encapsulates this game, because he said they're backing off and Sancho scores. I mean, that's basically this game. Mainz backed off too many times. In the second half, when they decided to press a little bit more, they immediately were more dangerous. Dortmund cut out of position. I still maintain Guerreiro could be a massive liability defensively and positioning. I got absolutely slaughtered for that opinion on Twitter, but I stand by it because we've seen it a few too many times this season where he doesn't track back, and it leaves huge gaps in the back line. But be that as it may, Dortmund got it done. And to me, this game featured the two best coaching stories of this Bundesliga season, with Edin Terzic and Bo Svensson, who both, in my opinion, should be strong contenders for coach of the season. Because what Bo Svensson has done at Mainz, a team that everyone thought, well, okay, it's going to be Mainz and Schalke directly relegated, because Mainz were abject, to say the least. They were rudderless and not going anywhere. Everybody got thrown out and fired. Then they brought in basically the old team, and they grabbed Bo Svensson, who's done a miraculous job with Mainz, an absolutely fantastic job. And you can say the same thing with Edin Terzic, both coaches that came in not at the beginning of the season, that came in after a previous coach had been let go, and were in a rather dire situation and completely changed the tone of the season. So to me, these are two of the coaching stories of the season and should be candidates to win coach of the season.
Yeah, I don't even know who I would give it to. I think, honestly, what Bo Svensson has done after being in the Rückrunde level on points with Schalke, I think they both had 7 points. I think that's even a little bit harder to achieve what Terzic has done with Dortmund. But yeah, it's obviously close because the Terzic story is also just amazing. But yeah, it's probably between those two. Archie, I don't know if I want to say too many things about the game, because, like I said, it wasn't the most interesting game. But what was interesting was you had a fun little interview with Jude Bellingham after the match. And of course, I haven't even really mentioned his name in the context of the cup final, but I think in both those two games, he was also one of the better Dortmund players. So what can you report from that?
So I think that Jude Bellingham is a great character who you guys are going to have more fun with in at least the next year. I asked him what he would be drinking to celebrate
the
fact that Dortmund are back in the Champions League. And because he's not of legal age to drink beer in the UK, but you can in Germany, I thought, okay. But yeah, as you say, Capri Sun was his choice. It was interesting because Edin Terzic was still giving him plenty of instructions. He wanted him to come over to give another passing option a lot in the first half. I kept on hearing him shouting, Jude, 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 and then just trying to pull him closer to the touchline where Dortmund had the ball. But he is supremely talented, supremely confident. There was a pass he hit in the warm-up for the game against Werder Bremen, which was just this full volley, kind of which he hit sideways. And just ever since then, I've just been watching his technique in awe, because it is quite something to have the confidence and swagger that he does when he's still 17 years of age. The thing that I would also pick out report from this is that Edin Terzic has taught Mo Dahoud how to press and how to tackle and win the ball back. And that is something that I didn't think I would see this season. Mo Dahoud has many qualities, but boy, has he cost the team on a couple of occasions with his lax and his laid back interpretation of winning the ball back. I will never forget the look on and indeed the sound of Erling Haaland away at Cologne when he was shouting, Mo, what the fuck are you doing? When Dahoud was trying something for a second time, having also just let's put it this way: it looked like he was playing a very relaxed game of tag in the park when Cologne got forward for their second goal. So I think that actually it was those little details there. Matthias was talking about Jadon Sancho. You've seen how difficult he is to defend in the last week, in that RB Leipzig didn't have a clue how far to stand off him. Neither did Mainz. At times they got too tight. And the thing is, if you get too tight to Jadon Sancho, then he'll dribble past you. Then I think the correct thing to do, I think, is you want to try and offer him a running duel. You don't want to get into a dribbling duel with him. If you get into a dribbling duel with him, he will win. If you get into a sprint off, he's quick, but he has this cage footballer mentality of, no, I want to dribble past you. I think it's like sewn into his DNA that he picked up. So it was a professional performance, and that in itself is something that is an evolution from Terzic's Dortmund. That's something that just wasn't there at the start of the season, or indeed midway through the season.
Yeah, I think everything you just said is 100% correct, and I have nothing further to add. So, Matthias, we are now a side that has qualified for the Champions League. In the process of getting there, obviously, first of all, what I wanted to say, the three-dimensional chess that Dortmund have played by getting the announcement out that Rose will leave Gladbach early, and with that triggering the avalanche of then Gladbach announcing early that they will get Hütter, and then basically the entire Hütter feel-good moment collapsing in Frankfurt, and that shattering Frankfurt's hopes and dreams. Even though I do not play any pleasure in this, but this is pretty much how it went down. That the effect of coaches leaving at the end of the season, I think you saw them all with Leipzig, you saw it with Gladbach, you saw it with Frankfurt. So that all being said, that's obviously one aspect of Dortmund's comeback of making up these 7 points to Frankfurt, even though, as I said before, I take no pleasure in it because I was really rooting for Frankfurt to get into the Champions League and was hoping for Wolfsburg to collapse a little harder. But Matthias, now we are in the Champions League, and obviously that means in the process there was some team building going on. But obviously the ramifications for this are huge in a positive way. What do you think will be the positive knock-on effect that Dortmund have actually a little bit against the odds in the end clinched this, I would say very important for the club, the spot 4th or 3rd, whatever it will be?
Well, first of all, echoing your first point with the dominoes, I think that's the point when Schmatke and the Wolfsburg leadership looked at Oliver Glasner and said, "You better shut the fuck up, man," because this isn't going well for the other guys. So you be quiet about your contract ending next year. So Wolfsburg collapse next season, but what this means in a greater context is, I believe, Erling Haaland's going to stay around another season. That's been said definitively now for weeks, but now that you say, hey, we are in the Champions League, Erling, we continue to showcase you at the highest level. Please don't leave us yet. That I think is, I would say, I feel 90% confident that Haaland's going to stay.
Well, I think Dortmund were probably going to force it through one way or another, but I feel like now it's going to be just a little bit less stressy with dealing with Raiola and this entire ordeal.
Exactly. It's going to be everyone, we're all happy now. You won a cup, and we're going to the Champions League with a meaningful club not called Red Bull Salzburg. So then you look at all the other players that are in the side that are key players. You mentioned Jude Bellingham. Obviously, he's going to want to stick around, and he will. And Dahoud is now the man, in my opinion. I still don't understand why Löw didn't even consider him now for Germany, but it's fine.
Seconded.
Then he's one of the best playmaking central midfielders in the Bundesliga and for Germany. I mean, if you would have Dahoud and Kimmich in midfield, there's going to be more dynamism in there than with Toni Kroos. But, that's a different story for a different podcast and so on. But he is now a star in Dortmund's side. And Jadon Sancho is the one that I'm really curious about because, in the first few seasons when he's a young guy and he made a few questionable decisions, but that's okay. If my questionable decisions at that age were made public knowledge on social media, I probably wouldn't have a job. But that all being said, you've really seen over the last few months how much he's identifying with Dortmund. And maybe it's a farewell tour. Maybe he's like, I'm leaving, and now I realize how much I really love it here. Or it could be, I'm thinking about leaving, but I really love it here, and maybe I'll stay. That's the one that'll be interesting because that's the domino in the side, not Haaland, but Sancho, that will also determine how much money Dortmund have available to invest in areas that I think they need to, like a real right back, maybe a center back that is a center back that can, spell Akanji and Mats Hummels, and, maybe move Guerrero in central midfield and have a left back that actually tracks back and possibly upgrade at the keeper position. You can't do all of that if you don't have a sizable chunk of money coming in. That, yes, the Champions League money is there, but they transfer money given that we are still in a pandemic economic world for sports. That's the key transfer. And the question is Dortmund better off with him or better off without him, knowing where you're going to be upgrading and hoping that players like Gio Reyna become more consistent and grow. I don't think you can get rid of Torgan Hazard in that moment. The question is then, what is with Julian Brandt? I think Renier, in my opinion, you may as well cancel that loan. He's been a non-impact player. So there are key decisions there, but it all hinges, in my opinion, on Jadon Sancho.
I spoke to Jadon Sancho for ESPN a couple of weeks ago, and I asked him that very question. So, you want to stay, right? And the answer he gave, I would say, was a very polite, I've had a great time here, but look at the time. I think I better be off now. But I really like everybody here, and I don't want to sour anything, but I think it's time. And I think that given what he was purchased for, 7 million euros, was it, a couple of years ago, and I don't think anyone could have expected for him to explode in the way that he has done. But I put it this way, Matthias, I would be very surprised if he is still at Borussia Dortmund this time next year. It's a shame. He's one of those players who is just a joy to watch. And I guess in your cases, it's a joy to watch him play in your club's colours, because he does things with a football that are just, magnificent. I've got in trouble with some French supporting Borussia Dortmund friends of mine for calling him the English Ronaldinho. But that's more about the lack of players with imagination that we see over on the island, as you say in Germany, than it is to him actually being anything close to that. I know he's a big Ronaldinho fan, and he I think draws a lot of inspiration from him. But yeah, all signs point towards a move back to England, I think, this summer.
Yeah, well, I would observe that with a very heavy heart, because as you just said, Matthias, he absolutely identifies with the club, and I think you can say that's very genuine. The development he has taken this season is absolutely unreal, and it's obviously sad to see players like him leave, especially leave without a big audience, and I'm not entirely sure how title celebrations will or will not commence after the season. I haven't really, I'll be honest, the last week I haven't really had any time to read into what's going on at and around Borussia Dortmund. So I hope everyone can cut me some slack here. But that would obviously be a little bit heartbreaking. But obviously, it's also just very, very nice to know how much of great football we did manage to enjoy. Now, obviously, there is one game left this season. It's going to be a home match against Bayer Leverkusen, and I'll be honest, I was very nervous about this particular game, looking at the schedule when Dortmund hadn't clinched the Champions League, because Leverkusen is always a wild card and it can always go either way. You never really know, and especially usually the cliche on the final match day is that Leverkusen absolutely choked, but they had already choked this much that they have nothing left to play for. So, Matthias, as I said, this could be the final game of Jadon Sancho. This will definitely be the final game of Marcel Schmelzer and Lukas Piszczek. It might also be the final game of Thomas Delaney, because I think he has been linked with English clubs, and I think that that's absolutely a move that could make sense for him at this point in the career. So obviously this is always a match of saying goodbye. At the same time, of course, Dortmund, I think, do want to stay ahead of Wolfsburg because of what Schmadtke said after they faced each other, when Schmadtke said that looking at Dortmund's schedule, he's not really too afraid of Dortmund pipping them, but now they are actually ahead of Wolfsburg, and I think the goal difference is such that if Dortmund win with 1 goal difference, then Wolfsburg would have to beat Mainz, I think, by 4 goals, and Wolfsburg actually, and I looked this up earlier, have only won with a scoreline or margin higher than 4 once, and that was a 5-0 win against Schalke, but obviously they're playing against Mainz, who I think have sobered up again. So, Matthias, what are we to expect of this final weekend of Bundesliga football this season?
Well, I'm expecting a 4-4. Just why not? Let's have some fun. It's Bosch. I think there's also a good chance. Sorry, it's Bosch. It's Bosch.
Please don't rub any more salt into the wound. This is still. Oh.
Sorry. I miss Peter Bosch. I like Peter Bosch. But it's Leverkusen. Sorry, that was more I guess it's irrespective of who's on the touchline. I think there's also good chances Roman Bürki's last game as Dortmund player. Right. On Thomas Delaney, I'd like to say one thing, because I got in some heated debates on Twitter with some people who know everything better than I do.
I think they're also just called debates.
Debates, yeah. I wouldn't, yeah. Thomas Delaney, I'd hate to see him leave, because I think he's a key player for Dortmund. And anybody that watched Dortmund this season knew how important he was. I mean, there were many matches where we here on the podcast said, I would like, if it's a double pivot, to be Dahoud Delaney. I mean, that's kind of where we leaned towards if it's a double pivot. And then you can throw in Bellingham, but ahead of Emre Can and obviously Axel Witsel. I mean, maybe he won't be back next season. I'd keep Delaney over Witsel personally, but that's just my opinion. Him going to Southampton, I don't blame him for doing that because I think it's a league and a style that is perfect for him. He is 29, I think now. Or so he's pushing 30, so it's like his last chance to go play in England. He's Danish, he's also American. He's spent time in Germany. It's like, yeah, let's have this one last adventure before maybe I go back to Denmark or play with Werder Bremen in the Zweite Bundesliga. To kind of, have that adventure. So I don't blame it for him. I would hate to see him leave. These are all players I'd hate to see leave, because I'm pretty sure there are players that are coming back from loan or that Dortmund are going to still hang on to, where I'm like, really? You're still here? Why? Not naming any names, Marius Wolf, but, it's just, it'll be a great way to send off some players that I think are highly appreciated, Schmelzer and Piszczek, and players that I think are underappreciated, Bürki and Delaney. And obviously Sancho, a super mega star. If not already, then definitely in the next few years.
Yeah, I agree. Archie, anything you expect from this match against Leverkusen?
It would have been interesting if Dortmund hadn't sealed their plays. Not just for the fact that this would be a bit more exciting, but also for just the narrative that another Dortmunder Jung in Hannes Wolf, at least in terms of his coaching past.
He's also from Dortmund.
Okay. That he could have denied Dortmund that place in the Champions League. But now that it's also known that it's his last game at Leverkusen, with them having their new coach, Gerardo Sejan.
Oh, really? I didn't even know that.
Yeah, that's
Young Boys Band
been announced. I still need to work on the pronunciation, but it's that's all done. So I think, it's. I would also be from an interviewing perspective, I would be really upset if Thomas Delaney leaves the Bundesliga, just because he is, by some distance, the best interviewee in the league. Because the way that he speaks English is a lot more entertaining than the way that most English people speak English. He just has a wonderful turn of phrase. I think back to before the Mainz game, he was speaking to a colleague of mine and was saying that winning the cup was the cream, but getting into the Champions League would be getting the cake. And it's just like, how do you have such a grasp of English that is enviable, I would say, to most? And his description of Jadon Sancho from a couple of years ago, I spoke to him after a derby win where he'd scored against Schalke, and I just remember him saying that whenever you're playing against Jadon Sancho in training, he makes you shake in your pants. And I still think that is probably the best description of what it must be like as a defender to play against Jadon Sancho. So it's from a neutral perspective, with a heavy heart if Thomas Delaney goes, but also to be a little more serious, he is dressing room glue. You need characters like Thomas Delaney who are realistic in the way that they view things, who are not prepared to shy away from things when the going gets tough. I would think that as much as Dortmund have a glut of good central midfielders there, I think that if I was Dortmund, I would also be tapping him on the shoulder and being like, but we do need you here still. There is still very much a part of us that needs you here. But the thing is, as you're saying, Matthias, 29, this is last big move territory for him in his prime years. And look, as a Fulham fan, I'm gutted that he'll go to Southampton if that move does indeed turn out. Because I think he'd be a very good signing for any mid-table Premier League club.
Yeah, I think that can sort of conclude our Leverkusen preview, because I honestly don't have too much more things to say on this game, and I really need to eat. I haven't had any breakfast yet, so I need to take care of that as well. So Matthias, I know you have to do other stuff as well, so I'll leave you with the first pick of a prediction, and of course you can tell our listeners where to follow you on the Twitter.
Well, I mean, I said 4-4 kind of tongue-in-cheek. Let's be a little bit more realistic and go 3-2 Dortmund victory. Just funsies at the end, and you can disagree with me about Delaney, Bürki, and the like, and Guerrero's defensive positioning on Twitter at Matthiasu.
Yeah, Archie, if people actually want to see how you flex your interviewing muscles on Twitter, and I really appreciate the long-winded threads that you are putting out there, where can they find that, and what's your prediction for said game?
So, @ArchieRT1 is my Twitter handle, and prediction is 4-4.
Yep, I'll make sure to remember that when Dortmund win 8-0.
I am hoping for mayhem. I'm hoping that Leverkusen pin up a photo of Peter Bosz on the dressing room wall, and they're like, you know what we're doing this for? We're doing this in memory of him. I mean, they probably should have done this. I mean, he's not dead also. But, you know, what I think that both teams should pay tribute to. What would Peter have done in this situation?
All right. In that case, it might as well end 5-0. Or but I don't know for who.
If you're mean about Peter Bosz, we're going to have trouble. All right. This is, you know, Stefan, you're talking to my footballing dad there. That's
all right.
You know, don't step out of line.
I won't. So I'm just going to predict that Dortmund will win this 5-3. Like you said, it's going to be a crazy game. What else? So yeah, you can follow me at Stefan Butzko, and everything shall go back to a more regular order now that I'm back in the United States. So please stick around for more, as they say. Stay tuned, and you can do that at Yellowwallpod on Twitter and Facebook. You can subscribe to the show on YouTube, to iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, etc., wherever you download your podcast. If you want to contribute financially or become an episode sponsor, go to our patreon.com/theyellowwall. I once again want to thank you, Matthias and Archie, for coming on. And of course, our dear listeners, I want to thank you especially. And I hope you all had a splendid time celebrating not only the cup win, but also reaching the Champions League. I do think that it's a very big deal, in considering that Dortmund sort of ran the table, and I think had 6 or 7 Bundesliga wins straight in a row. Is still a fantastic achievement. I don't really care whether Dortmund are a team that should have been in second place regardlessly. I think if you string that many wins together in the Bundesliga, which to me is still a rather competitive league, then it's always a fantastic achievement, no matter what. So with all that in mind, I hope you all have a fun weekend and enjoy a 5-3 win against Leverkusen. And with that, as always, thank you for listening, and goodbye.